Good afternoon everyone. Please very welcome to this session. My name is Jorge Vega and I will be moderating the panel called Civil Clause and the Militarization of German Universities. Again, thank you all for being here and also to all the panelists. Before we begin, I will just briefly tell the outline on the structure of the panel. We will start with 3 individual interventions that will be up to 15 minutes each, and this will be followed by a moderated dialogue among the panelists and discussion, of course, with you. Okay, so let's just go directly to our first speaker. I would like to invite then Yul Ulbricht to take the floor, and if you could please just introduce yourself and then just go straight.
Okay. Hi, thanks for the organizers for the really important conference this weekend. My contribution will be more historical, and I will look at the, let's say, broader context of the German-Israeli military cooperation. And I will try to situate this in history before then Lucio and Nabil will go more into detail, specifically like regarding the questions around academia and the development there. So I'm going to start right away. I will start first to look at the economy of genocide and how this has built up in the last decades, before I then will say something on Germany's role in the development of the settler colonial infrastructure, to then look a little bit at Germany's role of weapons exports, but not so much from the perspective of like what was delivered, but for what it was delivered. Just to give you a brief outline of my input. I would say that Germany should not be conceived merely as a penitent nation endlessly trapped in the labor of Vergangenheitsbewältigung and the endless working through of its past, but rather as an imperial actor pursuing its geopolitical and economic interest within the global capitalist order. The question is then how to understand Germany's concrete role in sustaining and legitimizing Israel's genocidal and expansionist project with having its own interest. Germany has consistently approved and expanded arms exports to Israel, embedding this material support within an inverted form of memory politics. The discourse of historical responsibility for the Holocaust has manifested in the dictum Israel's security is Germany's Staatsräson, its reason of state. This has become a moral alibi for imperial complicity that converted the so-called historical guilt basically into a political economy of militarization, arms circulation, and military cooperation. The ideological and narrative architecture of...
Sorry, they're asking you to use a microphone.
We have a microphone.
Is it okay?
Should we use it, or...?
It's better to
Okay, all right. Can you hear me now better? Okay. The ideological and narrative architecture of Germany's genocide support have been majorly explained through memory politics or the endpoint of a remembrance culture gone astray of a German guilt complex. And while this is a crucial, let's say, instrument to be studied in detail, like this ideological narrative architecture, I think it's a dead end to see it in isolation of the broader structural dynamics of capitalism and empire that continue to shape Germany's role. Germany's profit-making and accumulation are concretely implicated in the technologies and infrastructures of destruction, and thus in the reproduction and perpetuation of occupation and ethnic cleansing itself. While we have witnessed in the past two and a half years that the genocide in Gaza has been a collective imperial project, primarily through the United States and Germany, in which capitalism and democracies are both together in their own right orchestrating a genocide as if it was the most natural and normal thing in the world. Back to business as usual, numerous companies have economically participated in the occupation of Palestine and with absolutely no qualms in the economy of genocide. Democratic institutions such as the Ministry for Economy, they put a stamp on every arms export leaving Germany. And most of the arms industries, companies of the arms industry have seen increasing profits or exploding profits in the last 2 years. So I think it's also really important to look at the democratic structures of the support of genocide and not only fixating on the fascisation tendencies, but looking at how democracy has produced that. As the second largest and partly the largest exporter of arms to the Israeli state, Germany has experienced an unprecedented economic boom of the devastation of Gaza and the Palestinian life. I think I don't need to, I think here in this room, most of this is already clear, but I just want to mention a few things, a few arms exports of Germany to Israel, which have been provenly being involved in the genocide. There are the endless attacks on Gaza. Germany has approved 2 combat drones that have played a role in the aerial bombardment. The global Sumud flotilla has been attacked by German-built warships. Hezbollah drones have been taken down by the German Navy. The German company MTU developed the engines for Israel's Merkava tanks, which have been extensively used in, for example, the attacks on the Al-Shifa hospital and the Indonesian hospital. Germany has produced the anti-tank weapons Matador, with which the IDF soldiers filmed themselves and created this fascist, sick TikTok trend of destroying Palestinian homes for fun. So that I think it's needless to say at this point that Germany is not only a supporter of Israel, but has played an active part in the genocide. Yet debates on this relationship, I think, are often obscure, that the military cooperation extends far beyond the realm of the ceaselessly flow of arms back and forth to Israel. As I said earlier, the co-development of Germany's and Israel's military industries are concretely implicated in the reproduction and perpetuation of occupation and ethnic cleansing itself. So I will first say a few things about Germany's role in the development of Israel's settler colonial infrastructure, post-war and pre-67, and then we'll say something on how Staatsräson was deployed in the politics of counterinsurgency and of territorial securitization of resource extraction. So since its founding in 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany has been entangled with Israel's settler colonial project. In 1952, the so-called Reparations Treaty bound West Germany after the Holocaust to transfer 3 billion Deutsche Mark in goods and services to Israel. Germany supplied iron, steel, chemicals, oil, technical expertise, with what West Germany funded the logistical and infrastructural expansion of Israel's telephone and telegraph system, as well as the expansion of the port of Haifa, which led to a recategorization of this port to be able to handle more goods. That was also an expansion into the sea and into the trade, global trade. Germany contributed to the development of Israel's steel, railway, freight shipping and mineral industries, including a plant of the mining and the production of copper that had then become an essential pillar in the Israeli economy. These projects consolidated the Zionist settler economy and infrastructure at the moment, only a few years after the Nakba, after 750,000 people got expelled. And when Palestinian displacement and massacres defined Israel's expansion, from Ariel Sharon's massacres on Al-Bujay in Kiba to the massacres in the West Bank and again Gaza in 1955, to the tripartite aggression against Egypt in 1956, to the expulsion of Syrian farmers along the border, and ultimately, and what should begin as the conquest and military occupation of the rest of Palestine beginning in 1967, all that gradually evolved into a sustained project of Israeli settlement. And as Kenneth Levin argued already in the 1970s, there was no doubt that these various basic development projects did more than enhance Israel's economic situation. The striking advances in electric power, transportation, communication, iron and steel production, and so forth, were massively there to strengthen Israel's military capacity. And I think that's crucial to understand also the long history of Germany's involvement. In the name of reparation, Bonn was the main funder of Israeli militarization and economic consolidation with a, let's say, tormented German conscience. The reparations were paid as, citing Konrad Adenauer, compelling moral obligation to Jewish victims of Nazi oppression. It is clear, however, that this was a mere rationalization for the policy, and it is needless to say that there was no moral reason for West Germany to donate compensation to the State of Israel, as opposed to reparations to individual Jews and their families whose wealth has been confiscated, houses have been expropriated, whose family had been killed, who had suffered from Nazi fascism. At a time when the State of Israel was itself responsible for the ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Understood from today's prison of the unrepentant canonization of Germany's Staatsräson, where again anti-Semitism hunt, the lethal support for genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians converge, a tone was set that refused to change for, I think, for decades, what you can see until today, that an ethos where the memory of one catastrophe served to justify the perpetuation of another. So the imperial interests of Germany are not as clear as when you, for example, look at the Mandate time in Britain or US and oil. But one of the arguments that was brought up by the historian Frank Stern and then later by Kenneth Levin and then Daniel Marecki just recently wrote a book about that. They explain, or they try to explain, this situation through the lens that the Federal Republic of Germany wanted to buy its way back into the Western Alliance after the war, and back into the economic integration in the Western arena, and back into NATO on the pressure of the US. Across the following decades following that, the German-Israeli relations evolved into a dense military-industrial complex, a ping-pong of techniques, of joint training, of knowledge transfer between the Bundeswehr and the IDF through the military academic cooperation that also Nabil will, I guess, talk more about it. As a military official, he was a military attaché in the Israeli embassy in Berlin, stated publicly in an interview, the IDF shares almost continuously and directly with the German army every insight we gain from the practical experience of our army's operation. There are no secrets between the armies, and as a result of that, the Bundeswehr has a share in everything we develop. I think that's like crucial to understand like the context. It's not about like weapons export, but it's like about a military cooperation between Germany and Israel, which is decade long. And I think this is not something they just state, but they do. There are joint German-Israeli cooperations in Guatemala, where they have trained death squads to massacre 10,000s of peasants. There was cooperation together with apartheid South Africa, especially like the Bavarian CSU. And the BND had close ties together with Israel to apartheid South Africa, where they also broke the weapons embargo and have sent weapons. And I mean that's two cases, but I mean there are like a ton of other examples too. Mozambique is, for example, one. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I mention all that because I think it is important to understand Germany's role in the genocide emerged from what it preceded it. So, yeah, I was talking about the Germany's role in the development of settler colonial infrastructure. But in the last decades, especially in the 90s but early 2000s, it has developed into the Staatsräson project that has been served as an instrument in the politics of counterinsurgency in Palestine and in the territorial securitization of resource extraction. Germany has built and co-developed Israel's entire naval fleet, the submarines and the warships in the times of the Second Intifada, the Lebanon War, and the relentless attacks on the West Bank and Gaza. At the beginning of the Second Intifada, Israel's Prime Minister Barak said, because of the shadows of the past, Germany has a special obligation to Israel. And it was when the Israeli army was brutally beating down the Intifada and deployed full military force, Germany's Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer declared his unconditional support for Israel. During and after the Lebanese war, the deployment of the German Navy to patrol the Lebanese coast was justified by the government on two grounds. First, an historical obligation to secure the existence of the State of Israel, and second, the interest in maintaining stability in the Middle East. In this context, Angela Merkel screw-tied Joschka Fischer's statement that our reason of state is above all to secure Israel's existence, and again delivered submarines. And that went on and on and on until 2015, when Germany supplied another 4 corvettes to Israel and financed a third of it while celebrating 50 years of arms diplomacy. The reason why they have sent the ships, and this is something they also publicly said, is to secure offshore gas platforms and to secure the gas extraction close to the shore of Gaza. So that's also an expansion, and I think it needs to be read also through this lens, that it was an expansion of into the sea and into the sphere of resource extraction, and Germany was like not only sending a few submarines, but has become a crucial part in the integration of Israel's economy into the global economy through resource extraction and capital circulation. Yeah, okay. Then I stop here and we can maybe talk about more in the Q&A.
Huh? Nabil.
Oh, sorry.
So thank you very much, Jules. We are going to follow up with Nabil.
Okay. Can you hear me in the back as well? Yeah, thank you for having me. Could I get...
Yeah. Can you see well?
Yeah, give me 1 second, please. Okay, thank you so much to Jorge and to Yula for going before me. Today I want to speak on the topic of universities and on the militarization of universities, and through collaborations, through ties, a lot of the work that we as students are doing. But crucially, I want to attempt to answer the question as to why universities were so hospitable to these ties in the first place. What makes universities as institutions and as infrastructures so willing to maintain these ties, to defend these ties, and also to be so willing to accept these domestic military industrial complex ties, as in what makes a university as an infrastructure so hospitable, what's its disposition. And I want to make an attempt at an infrastructural analysis later on, but first I want to generally talk about militarization of universities. So in a report published in June of last year, that actually the economy of genocide that Yula was speaking about too, I don't know if you got this from here too, but the this report that Francesca Albanese put out, The Economy of Occupation to the Economy of Genocide. In it, she explains how systems that previously upheld the slow violence of occupation and exploitation and dispossession are now entrenched as infrastructures of automated mass violence and rapid destruction. That entities that previously upheld, enabled and profited from Palestinian elimination and erasure within the economy of occupation, instead of disengaging, are now involved in the economy of genocide. And I'll get back to this in a bit, but I want to talk about the neoliberal university and Staatsorgan campus. So, broadly, modern universities today, especially in the West, operate as factories of state ideology and labor production. The governance, research priorities, and disciplinary mechanisms are increasingly dedicated to the interests, by the interests of state and private capital, in the service of capital accumulation and the disciplining of the student body into an indoctrinated workforce. And as the capitalist crises accumulate, these universities also become more and more vital for state governments, as in they need to increase the role of legitimizing and operationalizing this genocidal repressive politics that we've been seeing over the last year. And since 2023, especially, student protests have exposed these dynamics that universities have towards the state, the roles they play within it and the roles they play within capitalism. And as the students laid bare these institutions' entanglements into the genocide in Gaza, or they laid bare these entanglements in the genocide in Gaza, mainly by demanding divestment from weapons manufacturers and boycotting Israeli institutions. I'm talking here also about other Western nations. Through this, they challenge the intrinsic political function of the university, provoking violent repression from states that are increasingly reliant on it. And in Germany, this dynamic takes a distinctly authoritarian form, partly from what Yula described, that the topic of Israel in Germany is one that's very contentious due to all these different reasons, but also that the state ideology is just so deeply tied into these ties. But structurally, the difference between the US or the UK universities to German public universities, in the UK or US or other countries where private capital, often in the form of student loans, dominate university funding, German higher education remains largely state-funded. This is through different state institutions, through ministries, through foundations, foundations such as the DFG and the DAAD. Through this, the government as a whole wields a monopoly on financial leverage, unlike in these other countries where it's sometimes even less than half of the budgets come from state sources. And this financial leverage that universities have over their... This is the slide. These are the reports from the TU. So at the TU Munich and the TU Berlin, about 70% of budgets come from the state, if you add it all together. So this is federal, state level, DAD, DFG, which is at the TU 600 million a year. Munich, I think, over $1 billion, but comes about 70% from state sources. And this leverage that the state has over universities has been steadily increased, has been steadily used to reshape research priorities towards the policies of militarization, as Germany undergoes historic rearmament, and to the shifting research priorities under the wing of Staatsorgan. Because these two doctrines together require a predictable military-industrial academic complex, public universities are hereby brought into the logic of national security and securitization. In practice, campuses become sites where protecting Jewish life in Germany or in Israel justifies and moralizes the violent repression of students, and justifies the expanded surveillance of political speech, all the while maintaining a veneer of public neutrality. So I want to go briefly into the material ties. Keep me up on time if you could.
Just do have 10 minutes.
Okay.
You usually use 5.
Okay. So the report I mentioned earlier, Francesca Albanese singles out the Technical University of Munich, who she calls out here to saying that Technical University of Munich receives almost 200 million euros in funding every year from the European Horizon Foundation, and they work on active they have 23 active collaborations. This is a bit outdated at this point, and these collaborations include research projects with Israeli aerospace industries on the refueling of drones deployed in Gaza, It also includes collaboration with IBM Israel, which runs the discriminatory Israeli population registry, and the municipality of Jerusalem, which is in itself an apartheid, or a city that is entrenched in the annexation through urban transportation, is in a city that, through its urban fabric, entrenches apartheid. But some ties that Francesca doesn't mention, for example, are that the TU Munich's Department of Aerospace and Geodesy lies in the Ludwig Böllbach campus, a weapons technology and research hub that hosts prominent German defense companies, many of which develop and sell weapons used in the genocide in Gaza. And in March 2025, the TUM actually established a special partnership with one of its neighbors on this campus, Hensoldt AG, which I assume you've also found in your research, because they supply the IOF with radar and test equipment. And the TUM has since 2025, I mean, there's pictures of the president of the TUM shaking hands, and you know, they're tied specifically into the venture capital project, so they're pushing for startup companies coming out of TUM to both engage with this campus, but also especially with this company. According to the university, during this tie, Hensoldt AG is supposed to assume a central role in the area of defense in the emerging technology ecosystem of the university. This is part of the university's effort to become a leading European defense tech hub for accelerating military technological development. Yeah, but the TUM is of course not unique here. And I think many of the students here have seen this website before, where every campus has its own dot. But maybe if you haven't, it's here at the bottom, and I highly recommend you check it out. At the bottom it also has some research reports from students. Some of them you can see here. I just want to always take any opportunity to direct people to these projects. And I would, like I said, the TU Munich is not unique, and I'd like to highlight the TU Berlin in this. At the TU Berlin, student activists have exposed the state-funded Medwater project, which is a project in collaboration with Mekrot, Israeli state water company, which is on the UN blacklist, which has been numerous apartheid reports, which is also the company that, when the mandate came to turn off water to Gaza, that was the company that physically did that. They conclude that in practice, through this collaboration, the project materially supported Israel's apartheid water regime and violated international and German law, using 1.8 million in public funds. Furthermore, there's another project I want to highlight, which is the Modifiable Underwater Mothership project between the TU Berlin, Universität Rostock, ThyssenKrupp, and Atlas Elektronik, to develop a modular unmanned submarine. Both companies maintain extensive ties to the Israeli weapons industry. TU Berlin joined the project despite the system already having been advertised with its mine-laying and hunter-killer variants. As you can see here, this is from a military conference, or military exhibition, or how you call these things. And the TU Berlin joined the project after this had happened, despite the TU Berlin having a civil clause, which is a self-imposed commitment stemming from anti-war movements in the 1980s and earlier that prohibits it from participating in weapons and military research. So this pattern of complicity, though, is not just limited to technical departments. This is from the same project. The Center of Anti-Semitism Studies at our university is also deeply complicit in these ties, in the genocide and generally in the Staatsräson. 5 minutes? Okay, I'll hurry up then. But I want to highlight this project because it's an AI project run at our Center for Anti-Semitism Studies, and the Center for Anti-Semitism Studies, until the 2000s, we found, has done really solid research, or was able to produce critical research on Zionism, on anti-Semitism in Germany, but since the 2000s has really focused more on becoming more to justify or to validate the claims of Staatsräson. And this is one of these projects that not only validates the claims of Staatsräson, but takes those and is training an AI program to flag anti-Semitism online. Yet its approach is so close, or in its approach it defines anti-Semitism and any criticism of Israel or any support of the Palestinian people so tightly that any support of Palestine really is deemed anti-Semitism. By a researcher into this project in this Jacqueline article, he described the Decoding Anti-Semitism project as to date the most authoritarian attempt to use anti-Semitism scholarship to erase from the public domain not only uncomfortable opposition to Israel, but millions of Palestinian voices. now that I only have a couple of minutes, I want to briefly go through the other points. Then, why is the university getting away with this stuff, right? Like, the university is producing this incredibly destructive research at the detriment of German academic quality as well. And academics are feeling that too. There's isolation, the provincialization, but also these the encroachment of universities onto campuses. Why is the university okay with this? And I want to highlight two main structural reasons for it. And one is the neoliberalization and the budget cuts of German universities. Yeah. Here you can see a picture of my university in 2023. This is our chemistry building, where there was such extensive water damage that this is what it looked like afterwards. This was natural damage from just simply infrastructural decay, because the university is so intensely underfunded. And of course, this, I mean, to give you some numbers, there's I think a 3 billion, more than 3 billion at my university, or at our university alone, backlog of infrastructure that needs to be, infrastructural costs to just rebuild the university to this point it is now. And at this point, Berlin universities are being underfunded more. So by 2027, Berlin universities will have to get by with 1 billion euros less a year. And this is in conjunction with the general neoliberalization of universities, where there's less money for research. Research is tied more to these metrics, the new public management form, where you run universities as businesses, all this type of stuff, where there's an increased precarization both of the faculty and the students. And we also need to see this in conjunction with general cost of living crises, of course. And the second point I wanted to make was the complicit academics and administrators, faculties and institutes, where I'm talking specifically about academics that are complicit, but also the demographic changes. As in Germany, you have a professoriate, or the structure of universities that you have tenured professors who have job security, who are Beamte oftentimes, but also that in Germany, demographically, the older professoriate is usually white, conservative, and male. And that contrasts extremely strongly with the younger generation of Germans, especially the younger generation of Germans and foreigners who go to German universities. 1 in 3 Germans, or 1 in 3 German citizens in my demographic, 20 to 25, I think, 1 in 3 of them has a Migrations background, has someone in their family who has a migration background, and that's even more stark at universities. That contrasted with the professoriate means that there's a constant clash, and this comes most to head in universities, and especially in the topic of Palestine, because this old professoriate is also mainly Zionist. And here I just wanted to say one thing, why I put this guy up. I would have had a bigger paragraph to show you for this, but he is the Chancellor of the TU Berlin since 2021, but he's also been part of the SPD, the current since 1995. This person's held a position in the Berlin, or the Technical University of Berlin's Präsidium, while also being a member of one of the most conservative SPD factions in all of Germany. If you think of Martin Hicke, this is the guy that comes from it. If you think he's in the same faction in Neukölln as this guy, if you think of Giffey, that's the same citywide group. Yet, as Chancellor, he has a lot of he controls basically the day-to-day operations, and also as TU Berlin is trying to figure out their funding from now on, he's in a prominent role to reshape how that's going. So there's all these new initiatives where the TU Berlin is trying to solicit money from private actors, specifically from private actors through these foundations. He's one of the 3 people that is always undersigned. Yeah, so what I wanted to make the point about is that universities, which we can get into later on, are also infrastructures that have structural reasons behind them. Is that if it wasn't for Palestine, these universities would be going this path in any case. They're not immune to what's going on, and as our university becomes, or as our state becomes more authoritarian, right-wing, militarized, so all universities have to heed the call and go ahead, at least in the form they exist now. And if we start looking at universities as an infrastructure, we can also apply infrastructural analyses, and we can also look at, in this book at least, Malm doesn't really talk about how to actually physically build these up, but how do you get to that, right? How do you disrupt infrastructures, and that's what we need to think about too. And I'd like to leave with one last idea, is that in the case of Germany, we must take seriously the task of holding third states and their institutions accountable for their complicity in genocide. Germany's academic institutions are materially and ideologically entangled in the slaughter of Palestinians. If we accept that international complicity strengthens the machinery of mass atrocity, then we must start with questioning whether the same boycott, divestment, and sanctions tactics to isolate Israeli institutions must also be applied to German collaborators. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Lucho.
I also need the cable. Thank you very much, Emil. With this, with the adapter too. Okay, I will probably contrast with these two presentations. I like to polemize. So I am going to bring an analysis from this. I didn't change the title of this. Sorry, I kind of use copy paste sometimes. But I want to polemize in terms of what are the, let's say, the economic from the perspective of the critique of political economy, how is this militarization happening and this so-called what's the, let's say, material basis of this so-called Staatsraison. So and why this is kind of creeping into the universities more than before, maybe, I don't know. So I would just want to start with a sort of preamble, a very quick preamble on the character of scientific research and knowledge creation. I think we have to set the development of science in the context of the capitalist mode of production, in the sense that the application of scientific knowledge to productive processes in a, let's say, conscious way. It's something which is particular from the capitalist mode of production. It maybe happened before in different ways, but it's the first moment in history when it is targeted and thought of in this sense, right? And this is, we have to think universities in this sense, right? So just throwing some small snippets of this, of course it's a more complex discussion, but I think in that sense we have to understand science and academia as a process, as a labor process, right? Which has specific forms, takes specific forms, but it's in the end a labor process, and it's a labor process that I think it's connected with the production of what Marx called relative surplus value, right? So it's the possibility of appropriating extraordinary profit by applying science that makes a particular labor process more productive. This can take various forms. So it's not only just in a factory. It can also be quickening commercialization, quickening the administration of personnel. It has very different expressions. So again, I'm moving here in a very general way. And sorry if I'm being very dense. But then finally, if production became scientifically organized, that also means that the working class that moves this production also needs to in some way be capable of understanding and wielding this process, right? So this is a double, let's say it's a double process. The production process become more technified, and then there's a need for a working class that can understand and administrate these scientifically organized processes, right? So then the process of formation of the scientific working class is also part of the, and then I would just move. So what are the three uses of science in a capitalist mode of production in this sense, right? I just make this distinction that sometimes comes from the scientific literature. I just added the last one, which is the one I already mentioned, the formation of scientifically qualified working class through education, which is what universities are for. But then also science itself takes two different forms of it expresses in two different forms, right? So then you have what is called basic or general science, which is the, let's say, more abstract, non-directly targeted, application of science. So you don't necessarily research how to cure cancer, but you research what is the nature of cells, how do cells connect with each other, how the body works or whatever. And then you have what is called a downstream science, which is the application towards a specific production process, right? This is particularly important, and I'm going to move on the next slide, and I'm going to show a graph. I have shown already several forms, places, because this takes particularly historical forms in the development of capitalism, and particularly after the 70s. What happened? What this graph shows, you have a rise, a steady rise of the annual patents but then actually like the annual publication of like what are called corporate scientists, which are like scientists like hired by the big capitals like in the US, reduces steadily, right? So what is the process? Like what is happening here? Thing is like the big capitals that like before like kind of dragged the process of like scientific innovation like inside them. So they had like scientific sections inside the capitals. So like I know Volkswagen had their own scientific division, like Bosch has its own scientific division, whatever. Broke down those divisions, moved like this research towards like general science, right? So they moved them to public, like to university, to public journals, like etc. But then they retain some of the scientists as employees that are participating in scientific process of like general science, because then they can see what are the scientific innovations that are possible to like privatize, right? And then they can jump in, like move through patents and intellectual rights, privatize them, and then apply them to specific like forms of commercialization, right? This is the way, and this is important to understand, because like you see like this kind of like split between like public science and private science, and then like when you see this perspective, you kind of like realize that it's actually like, you know, capital are in both sides. Because in the end, if you think about public science in Germany, for example, just to like throw it to polemize, like in the end, the German state is financed by German capitals. Right, so and actually I'll go for that later. But actually, the German capitals like steer like the German state. They had like a very strong influence in how the German state moves. So like it's just like a sort of like roundabout in which like capitals decide like, because the problem with general science is that you can develop something and then you can not actually see exactly how you can use like this particular development of like how cells work or like how this material like. So then they kind of like share this research on this common general science that nobody knows where it go, and then like for privatization they are like, yeah, you know, everyone plays their own game. So then like the one who jumps in first and privatizes, yeah, you were lucky, like, you know, we failed, we got later, whatever. So, and this is the way in which, and this is how the quotes on these papers and of this like research group, the firms are able to create private value from a public good, right? But then again, this public good is like financed also by like private capital, so it's like kind of like a roundabout of this. Why is this relevant for German understanding German academia? And here I'm just like playing with some like hypothesis. How much am I? Okay. Oh, okay, I have. Okay, I'm fine. By the way, I was going to also talk about Israeli academia, but I won't have time. So yeah, just spoilers. It's basically focused like on military research. Maybe you have heard not like all this time. Yeah, but what about German academia? So I think to understand like the general form of German academia, you have to like kind of understand the general form of German capital, right? Because that's what finances German academia. So just in a general sense, again, I'm like jumping over like 70 years of like economic history here, so I'm sorry for being like a little generic in this. But I think after like the Second World War, like the capitalist character of like the German state was revealed in a very curious way. This is like kind of the economic discussions on like why West Germany was rebuilt, right? Like because actually Allies at the beginning wanted to like, you know, keep it like deindustrialized, and the problem that they found is that if they kept Germany deindustrialized, then like all of Europe would actually be deindustrialized, because Germany was in the middle of all the value processes like around. So they actually had to like rebuild like Germany so that like they could rebuild like the whole Europe, right? So Germany is historically like an industrial hub. So yeah, I just put this quote from Herbert Hoover, like to just see how strategic this is. This also like I don't know, shows what's the difference between the USSR strategy with what to do with Germany, because they just took everything, so they just then didn't care about like. Yeah, but that's going to, and then like after like the so-called Wirtschaftswunder, like this like revival of German economy, which like, you know, neoliberals explain like, oh no, they had the right policies. It's like, no, they didn't have the right policies. They had like poor people and they had like unused capacity like that survived the war. that's the simple explanation of why like German capital was like so successful post-war. What happened, like Germany became like this kind of like expert in like what is called like labor class differentiation, right? So then like what basically Germany, this is part of the scientification, like the scientific development of the production process, right? Because it creates like segregation inside the working class, in which like you have like a more subjectively, how do you call it, like more manually oriented like working class. You know, you just need to fit this working class to like be able to participate like in very like simple like manual processes. So you can move one part of the assembly or of the production process to that working class, and then you have a technically developed like working class that's able to like organize and develop this in a more technical form, right? And this of course like has like different layers, and this also like operates and in a like surprise racialized like way. So particularly in Germany, this first finds an expression with internal differentiation, which is racialized like through the process of like the Gastarbeiters, which is like very interesting because it actually what happens like Germany started like bringing Gastarbeiters from places that are from near Germany, and then like it starts like progressively getting further away, right? So first it was Austria, then like Italy, then Spain, then it gets Turkey, and then after the 70s and 80s, you have this internationalization of like. By the way, this is not only Germany doing this. A lot of countries have done this. Like Germany is not so special in this sense. I'm sorry to. But yeah, then like during the 70s and 80s, like this process like internationalizes. Like a lot of countries are doing the same thing, and this. With the development of international logistics particularly, like this breakdown of the production process at an international sphere enables like this like working class differentiation at different like national levels, right? So then like, and you can see this in everywhere. I mean, if you see it like, for example, clothing industry, it's very clear that there are like places where like the design of the clothes are made, and then like the actual like manual labor is done in sweatshops, right? And the character of the countries are different. With the automobile, I studied this particularly with the automobile industry, and again, it's the same process. Like countries like started like getting further away from Germany as long as the process gets more technified, and it developed like this like middle layers of like semi-technified workers and so on, right? And this is the relationship with suppliers. So this gives also like a political character to the German state, right? That takes again different forms, different like political moments, but it is also always like a sort of commander of like global value chains in this sense, right? I mean, what Volkswagen does, what like Bosch does, they have like a lot of suppliers like around Europe and then like outside Europe, and they like differentiate them in terms of like prices, like how cheap they can get. And like what Volkswagen does, it just organizes like the assembly of the car, but it actually doesn't like assemble the car or produce any of the components, right? And then as an assembler, it has like control of all the labor processes, right? Because to put a particular piece, they have to know the material, they have to know the specificities, they have to know everything, right? You'll get why this is important for general research in a bit. Okay, I will, yeah, also this process, in my view, and I'm going to now move, how much time do you have?
Yeah,
2 minutes, Chucha, okay. Yeah, this process is actually collapsing right now, this differentiation. And this is important to talk about like electromobility very quickly. Because what electromobility like enabled like in the production process, like it reduces like dramatically the amount of pieces like for cars, right? It's gone from 1,400 to 200. This is just one, but if you see a lot of schemes, it's most a third or like most. So that like actually enhances the possibility of like automatizing the labor process and like push further away like the actual manual labor to like a minimum. Actually now today the only things that like in auto factories are done is basically like the cables. The only thing they have not been able to automatize. This is very important, as you can see, like this is Tesla, Volkswagen is there, is half of what Build Your Dreams is, so like the German capital like at a global level is really like kind of like in decadence right now, and this is also expressing like in the military industry. I will just close with this and give like some short comments to polemize with the idea that like the German capital is currently having a boom. It's actually the opposite. The industrial military industry which operates under this old scheme, it's actually like in crisis. So I just quote this a report from the I don't remember. It was an association of military commanders. A German Leopard costs 30 million. It costs 3 times more than an U.S. Abrams tank. Like the German military industry is very inefficient, and it's basically because all the military operates under this old scheme. And what's happening is that the production process is actually robotizing, right? So this international division of labor is just becoming obsolete, and all the migrant population becomes redundant because then you have robotized factories. You don't even have to turn on the light in the factories because nobody needs to see that it's full of robots, right? And then also the connections, transnational connection with suppliers, becomes also redundant. You don't need to have the neighboring country with cheap labor because you have robots doing it, right? Yeah, and the second one I put is also relevant. It's actually the Deutsche Bahn, which at least I hate. But actually, you know who else hated? NATO hates the Deutsche Bahn and the US, because it actually was also a problem for supplying weapons to Ukraine. And this is part of the a US report on this, and they were complaining, we have to cancel the contract. This guys, look how much money we're losing because they fucking don't take the bullets. Yeah, so actually the US military is not in a boom. It's actually and then we have to think out, I mean, then why is it now this booming militarization, right? And I think it's actually subsidies, and there's a lot of discussion that we can have later on that. But yeah, I'm going to just finish on why is this connected with general research, and why Israel is key player for Germany right now. So I think this particular kind of organization moves towards having general research in your national space, because then if you have if you organize national networks, you can have this general research that actually opens breakthroughs in different new sectors. But then you are the one organizing the value chains, so you don't care if there are spillovers. Right? I mean, you don't care if you just funded a program for AI and someone from your suppliers invents a way to use AI to, I don't know, create tires or whatever. Because you are the one taking the decision, and you have to ask them, and they will have to give you their cost expenses and the materials they're using, so then you will be in control of that process, even though this will be technically and apparently spillover of investment in science that you are doing, right? So, if you are, but the problem, and actually this expresses even in the German R&D system, right? I mean, they have problems with commercializing what they do, because they don't have the German companies don't have a circuit to actually commercialize most of the innovation. They just produce them, or this is at least what I've found. If someone has anything different, please tell me. And yeah, I will just close with this. Israel is the complete opposite. Israel is a R&D, applied science, directed, infrastructure, all this startup nation shit, which is also the thing in California and so on. It is applied science specific. So they actually don't have a lot of general science, because for that you need big investments. You need to fund a CERN center, and it's just a matter of quantity, of let's say how much. But it has an infrastructure that's made to just move this kind of research, particularly to applied science, and applied science with the help of the Israeli military, particularly to defense applications, because that's the special role that Israel has in the international division of labor. I'm sorry for exceeding the time.
That was perfect.
Yes.